Absolutely. Here's the first chapter of your story written according to your instructions. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I still remember the day I walked into that small, brightly lit studio, convinced that finally, something would change for me. It wasn't the first time I'd tried something new, but there was something different about this place. The walls were painted a crisp, clean white, and sunlight poured in through large windows, bouncing off the polished hardwood floors. A faint scent of essential oils lingered in the air, delicate but not overpowering. It felt inviting, almost like stepping into someone else's careful attention to detail, a space that promised transformation. He greeted me at the door, smiling broadly, holding a clipboard that seemed to carry both authority and reassurance. There was an ease about him, a calm confidence that made me believe I was in capable hands. He was probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver streaks running through his neatly combed hair. His eyes, a soft hazel, had this warmth to them, like he genuinely understood people, not just the surface of their struggles, but the unspoken parts too. "Good morning," he said, shaking my hand firmly but not aggressively. "I promise you'll see results faster than you think. Just trust the process." I nodded, a bit skeptical but willing. I had seen enough programs, read enough reviews, tried enough quick fixes to know that results rarely came as advertised. Still, there was something compelling about his voice, the way he explained things without rushing, how he made it sound achievable. That combination of hope and caution drew me in, and before I knew it, I was signing up for what he promised would be a life-altering experience in just a few short weeks. The first session started gently enough. He guided me through simple steps, movements, and adjustments I could do at home. I left feeling optimistic, almost light, as if a small spark had ignited somewhere deep inside. Over the next few days, I followed his instructions religiously. I was meticulous, tracking every detail, jotting notes, reminding myself that patience was part of the process, but soon, the spark began to flicker. The initial excitement gave way to discomfort, both physical and emotional. My routine, once gentle, started to feel unmanageable, and little aches crept into my muscles in ways that felt wrong. I tried to ignore it at first, chalking it up to growth, to the body adjusting. Yet there was a persistent unease, a quiet whisper inside me that maybe, just maybe, things weren't unfolding as promised. When I returned for my second session, he noticed immediately. "You look tense," he said, his tone still warm but now tinged with curiosity, perhaps concern. "Are you pushing too hard?" "I don't think so," I replied, hesitating. "I'm following everything exactly as you instructed." He nodded slowly, watching me with that same quiet intensity that had first put me at ease. There was a pause, a subtle shift in the room's energy, and then he said, "Sometimes, the body reacts in unexpected ways. But don't worry, it's part of learning, of understanding yourself better. Results take patience too, even if we aim for quick change." His words should have been comforting, but instead, they sparked a complex mix of frustration and doubt inside me. Here I was, trusting someone who promised rapid transformation, yet the path was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes uncomfortable in ways I hadn't anticipated. That evening, as I sank into my favorite chair at home, I stared at my reflection in the window. The lights of the city shimmered behind me, and for the first time, I questioned not just the method, but myself, my expectations, my need for speed, my desire for immediate gratification. I called him the next day, trying to articulate the mix of discomfort and determination I felt. Surprisingly, he listened, really listened, without interrupting or dismissing my concerns. There was patience in his response, a willingness to recalibrate the plan, to adjust the steps, and even an acknowledgement that promises of quick results can sometimes mislead even the most well-intentioned guidance. I remember hanging up the phone and feeling a strange sense of relief, as if admitting my vulnerability didn't make me weak but human. That night, I journaled for the first time in years, letting words flow that had been trapped behind expectations and disappointment. I wrote about fear, about the pressure I put on myself, and about the surprising respect I felt for someone who could see me, not just the surface, but the small tremors beneath, the contradictions and missteps that made me real. The journey wasn't ending, it was beginning. And in that quiet moment, I realized that even a terrible experience, or one that didn't go as planned, could hold a seed of growth if approached with honesty and attention. That realization was fragile, yet persistent, like a single candle flame refusing to be extinguished by the gusts of impatience and self-doubt. I didn't know it then, but this would be the first of many lessons, the first chapter in an experience that would test patience, resilience, and the unexpected beauty of learning through discomfort. And though the promise of quick results had faltered, a deeper understanding had quietly begun to take root. When I walked into the studio the following week, I noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. The sunlight still poured through the large windows, but now the room seemed quieter, almost more intimate. There was less emphasis on demonstration and more on observation, on listening to what my body was telling me. He greeted me with the same warm smile, though now there was a gentle seriousness in his eyes, like he knew the week had been a test of patience and honesty. "Good to see you again," he said, motioning toward the open space in the center of the room. "Let's take it slower today. Let's just see how your body responds without pushing too hard." I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief because the pressure had softened, but anxiety because I still carried the doubt of my last attempts. Could I really trust the process this time? Could I let go of the idea that results had to be immediate? He began with small adjustments, asking me to focus on my breathing, to feel each movement instead of rushing through them. At first, it felt almost painfully slow. My mind, conditioned to expect progress, struggled with the patience required. I kept glancing at him, searching for reassurance, and each time he caught my eye and nodded gently, I felt a tiny thread of trust weaving itself back into my confidence. Then he said something that shifted the experience entirely. "The body and mind are partners. If one is in a rush, the other resists. Let's learn to move together." Those words stayed with me. I realized that I had been so focused on achieving a specific outcome that I hadn't considered the journey itself, the subtle changes, the small victories, the self-awareness that developed quietly beneath the surface. He guided me through a series of exercises that felt almost meditative. I noticed tension I hadn't realized I was holding in my shoulders, in my lower back, even in my jaw. Each small release was accompanied by a surprising sense of clarity, like I was uncovering layers of myself that had been ignored for years. During a break, we sat across from each other, drinking water from the studio's glass bottles. The conversation shifted from instruction to stories, and I found myself opening up about past failures and the ways I had always sought shortcuts. He listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, occasionally offering observations that were insightful yet never condescending. "I think many of us want results so quickly because we're afraid of waiting," he said. "We're afraid the opportunity might pass or that we'll fail. But often, it's the waiting, the patience, that teaches us the most." His words struck a chord. I thought about the pressure I had put on myself, the relentless expectation that I should see progress immediately, and I realized how much that pressure had colored every attempt I'd ever made, not just in this program, but in life. There was a quiet honesty in admitting that I didn't have all the answers, that I needed guidance, and that learning to trust someone else could be part of the lesson. The session ended with a gentle cool-down, stretches that felt like a conversation with my own body. I left the studio feeling oddly invigorated yet calm, a rare combination for me. That evening, I reflected on the day's experience while sitting by my living room window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, each one like a small reminder that life is made up of moments, and sometimes the smallest ones carry the greatest significance. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a shift, not dramatic, but significant. The fear of failure that had shadowed me for so long seemed lighter, replaced by a quiet curiosity. What could I discover about myself if I allowed the process to unfold naturally, if I embraced discomfort as a teacher rather than a signal of failure? Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in my daily routine. I moved with more awareness, felt more attuned to the small aches and tensions that signaled I needed rest, and even noticed a newfound patience in the way I approached tasks at home. The promise of quick results was fading from my mind, replaced by a deeper understanding of what progress truly meant. When I returned for the third session, I felt different, less skeptical, more receptive. I still wanted improvement, of course, but I realized that the journey itself was shaping me in ways I hadn't anticipated. And that realization, more than any quick fix, was beginning to feel like the true result I had been searching for all along. When I arrived at the studio for the third session, there was a sense of familiarity now, like entering a space that had quietly become part of my rhythm. The sunlight still poured through the windows, but today, the shadows on the floor seemed more pronounced, stretching long and deliberate, Almost as if time itself had slowed to match the pace I was learning to honor. He greeted me with a nod, his eyes reflecting that same warmth and attention. Yet there was a subtle intensity today, as if he could sense the changes within me, even the ones I hadn't spoken aloud. "Good to see you," he said. "I think today we can explore a bit deeper. How does that feel?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'm ready." The session began with a gentle repetition of the exercises I had been learning, but soon he guided me through movements that demanded more focus, more presence. Each motion required that I truly feel my body, listen to it, and respect its limits. The difference now was striking. I no longer approached this as a task to complete or a goal to achieve quickly. I approached it as a conversation with myself, and he was merely a translator, helping me understand what my body was saying. At one point, he asked me to close my eyes and imagine the tension leaving my body as I moved through the exercises. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, feel the warmth of the sunlight on my arms, and sense the quiet encouragement in his presence. It was a strange combination of solitude and connection, as if I was alone with my own body and thoughts, yet profoundly supported at the same time. We paused mid-session, and he leaned back slightly, observing me. "You're doing something most people resist," he said softly. "You're paying attention to yourself instead of rushing for results. That's rare, and it's not easy." His words struck me in a way I hadn't anticipated. Rarely did anyone notice the quiet, invisible effort of being patient, of choosing awareness over speed. I felt a flush of gratitude, mingled with vulnerability. I realized that my journey was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and deeply personal. Every ache, every small correction, every moment of doubt and perseverance was teaching me something about who I was and how I approached life. The exercises continued, moving into patterns that challenged my balance and concentration. I stumbled a few times, catching myself mid-motion, and each time, he offered a calm, steadying hand, not to take over but to guide. There was no judgment, only support, and that simple presence was powerful. I began to notice a shift within myself. Where I had previously sought perfection or quick fixes, I now embraced the subtle victories, the incremental progress that often went unnoticed by others. After the session, we sat together again, drinking water and sharing quiet conversation. He asked about my week, about the ways I had integrated what I was learning into my daily life. I spoke about the small discoveries, the awareness of tension when I lifted heavy objects, the patience I had found during routine tasks, the unexpected moments of calm that came when I paused to breathe. He listened carefully, nodding and occasionally offering insights that were never directive, always reflective. "Sometimes," he said, "the journey teaches us more than the destination ever could. And when we finally understand that, the results, whatever they are, feel earned, not forced." I left the studio that day feeling a profound sense of clarity and quiet pride. For the first time in years, I realized that the desire for rapid change had blinded me to the beauty of the process itself. I understood now that discomfort was not a signal to stop, but a guide pointing me toward growth, resilience, and self-awareness. That evening, I sat by my window, looking at the city lights, and reflected on the journey so far. Each session had built upon the last, not in a linear race toward results, but as a layered exploration of patience, trust, and understanding. I realized that the promise of quick results, though appealing, had never truly mattered. What mattered was the depth of connection with my body, with my thoughts, and with someone willing to guide me without judgment. For the first time, I felt a sense of ownership over my own progress, a recognition that the transformation I sought was not just external, but internal, and that this understanding would shape not only the weeks to come but the way I approached challenges in every part of my life. And as I closed my eyes that night, I felt a quiet anticipation, a readiness to continue the journey with an open heart and patient mind, knowing that the next session would bring new discoveries, new challenges, and yet another step toward understanding myself in ways I had never imagined. When I stepped into the studio for what I knew would be our last session in this series, there was a quiet anticipation in the air. The sunlight streamed in as always, but today it felt different, warmer somehow, more intimate, as if the room itself recognized the journey we had taken together. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Excitement because I had come so far, and trepidation because I wasn't entirely sure what far really meant anymore. He greeted me with that same gentle smile, but now there was a visible recognition in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of how much I had grown. "Welcome back," he said, his voice calm, steady, and encouraging. Today, we'll tie together everything you've learned, not just physically, but emotionally. Are you ready? I nodded, feeling a strange blend of confidence and humility. I realized that the journey had transformed me more than any physical change could. Each session had been a lesson in patience, awareness, and trust, not just in him, but in myself. I had learned to listen to my body, to honor its limits, and to celebrate the small victories that often went unnoticed. The session began as usual, with slow, deliberate movements that allowed me to reconnect with my body. But today, he introduced exercises that felt almost symbolic, movements that required balance, reflection, and deep focus. Each motion felt like a conversation between my body and mind, a reminder that progress was not measured by speed or outward results, but by understanding and presence. At one point, he asked me to pause, close my eyes, and reflect on the journey so far. I could feel the subtle shifts in my posture, the awareness of muscles that had long been ignored, and a sense of calm that had been building quietly for weeks. I realized that the discomfort I had once dreaded had become a teacher, and the frustration that had once threatened to overwhelm me had transformed into patience and resilience. We sat together afterward, sharing water and quiet conversation. I spoke about the small changes I had noticed in my daily life, the moments of calm, the awareness of tension, the patience I had discovered in unexpected situations. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally, offering insights that were gentle but profound. "You've done something many people never learn to do," he said softly. "You've trusted the process, even when it was uncomfortable. You've honored yourself, and that's a result no one can promise but yourself." His words struck me deeply. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not because of any visible transformation, but because of the internal shift I had experienced. I had learned to value the journey over the destination, to find strength in vulnerability, and to recognize that real growth often comes from patience and reflection rather than speed and instant results. As I left the studio that day, the sunlight on my face felt warmer, more comforting. The city outside seemed different too, more vibrant, more alive, as if I were seeing it with new eyes. I realized that the promise of quick results, though appealing, had never truly mattered. What mattered was the journey, the lessons learned along the way, and the quiet, steady transformation that had taken root inside me. That evening, I sat by my window, reflecting on everything I had experienced. I felt gratitude for the guidance, patience, and understanding that had been offered to me, and for my own willingness to trust and engage with the process. I understood now that growth was not about rushing toward an end, but about embracing the path, with all its challenges, discomforts, and small victories. I also understood that life itself was not a series of promises, but a series of moments, some frustrating, some beautiful, all meaningful. And in that realization, I found a sense of peace and empowerment that no quick result could ever provide. As the city lights shimmered in the distance, I took a deep breath and smiled, quietly to myself. I had started this journey seeking immediate change, but I was leaving it with something far more enduring: self-awareness, patience, and a deeper respect for the process of growth, both within myself and in the world around me. It was, in every sense, the result I hadn't known I needed.